Charlotte wonders what a child is doing alone in the forest. The child sobs and calls out for Carlisle. Charlotte considers if he is lost and searching for his parents. Normally, she would have tried to help him find his family, but she freezes and hesitates. The boy's clothes are soaked in dark red blood, causing her surprise and disbelief. Seeing someone unexpected in the forest, especially a child in blood-soaked clothes, leaves her shocked. She reveals that 3 years ago, she became a character in the novel I'm the Duke's Contractual Wife. She met her demise in a car accident in Seoul, Korea. Following her death, she was reborn as the young daughter of a country baron. However, it took her some time to comprehend her new reality since the name Charlotte Rania was never mentioned in the aforementioned novel. While she might have made a brief appearance in the story as a minor or side character, she was merely an extra known as Noble Lady One. She contemplates the fate of becoming the female lead, envisioning herself falling victim to evil schemes, love triangles, and various hardships. Unwilling to endure such trials, she considers the alternative roles in the story, like the villainess tormenting the heroine or a supporting character who meets a tragic end. None of these options appeal to her. Thus, she sees her transformation into Charlotte as a blessing from above. However, her perspective shifts abruptly when she encounters the male lead's little brother. The boy cries loudly when he sees Charlotte, causing her to feel nervous. She asks him what's wrong and where his family is, but the boy just wails and mentions traveling with Mr. Knight, who is sleeping nearby. Just then, a man runs towards Charlotte, calling her name, but he gasps upon seeing the boy. He questions the blood, to which Charlotte reassures him that she believes it doesn't belong to the boy. Instead, it likely belongs to the knight escorting him, who might be injured. She instructs Sir Cedar to search the area, and he agrees to do so. Charlotte, feeling troubled, contemplates the significance of the emblem she notices, confirming it as the crest of House Heinst. She wonders why a young boy from such a prestigious family is in a rural territory far from home and why his clothes are soaked in blood. She hugs him, attempting to comfort him, expressing her belief that he must have been scared. Sir Cedar interrupts, informing Charlotte that it appears they were attacked. Surprised, she asks for clarification, prompting Cedar to explain that one of the attackers wore a jacket with the Heinz family crest, while the other four were clad entirely in black, leading him to believe they were assassins. Charlotte ponders the possibility of an assassination attempt, incredulous at the idea. She considers if this means the target was supposed to be Theodore Heinz. Reflecting on the original story of the novel I'm the Duke's Contractual Wife, she recalls how it began with a male lead mourning at his little brother's funeral, vowing revenge on those responsible for his death. Charlotte realizes with disbelief that the incident meant to kill Theodore occurred in this barony of all places. She's left uncertain about what to do next. The male lead killed anyone remotely involved in the assassination. Charlotte realizes the urgency of making it clear to him that her family had no connection to it. Otherwise, he might come after her family as well. She instructs Sir Cedar to prepare the carriage, intending to take the boy with them. Upon reaching the palace, the maids become anxious, questioning Charlotte about what happened to her and who the boy is. They notice the blood and immediately call for a doctor. Charlotte reassures them that the blood isn't hers or the boy's and urges them to remain calm, but agrees to have the boy checked by the doctor. One maid acknowledges Charlotte's instructions and rushes to get the doctor. Charlotte inquires about her mother and the nanny and learns they are in the backyard. She informs the maids that the boy will be staying with them for the time being and instructs them to prepare for his stay, to which they agree. Charlotte nervously ponders how to explain to her mother that this situation could potentially lead to their family's downfall. Her mother greets her, asking about her walk, but the nanny interrupts, shocked by Charlotte's appearance. Upon seeing the blood, Charlotte's mother becomes alarmed and questions her daughter about it. Charlotte reassures her mother that she's not hurt, but insists they have an urgent matter to discuss. Mother expresses disbelief that the attack occurred in their territory. Charlotte suggests sending a letter to Duke Heinz and taking care of the boy until he arrives. Her mother agrees, acknowledging it as the right course of action. Charlotte decides to have Sir Cedar investigate the matter further to ensure Duke Heinz understands their family's innocence. She expresses a wish for her father and brother to be present, but takes responsibility for handling the situation in their absence. Her mother agrees to leave up to Charlotte. Mother remarks on the ordeal the young guest has experienced and decides to have the chef make some sweets for him. She also suggests decorating the guest room. The nanny offers to take the boy for a nap. Charlotte thanks her and expresses concern that she will have her hands full for a few days. The nanny reassures Charlotte that she doesn't mind and is excited to take care of the boy. She encourages Charlotte to focus on her business while she handles the boy. Charlotte expresses her gratitude. Charlotte reflects that at this point she had no idea that her meeting with the boy would turn her life upside down. On the other side, the Duke inquires about any word regarding that boy named Theo. The butler expresses regret that they haven't found any information yet. The Duke insists that they must do everything possible to find Theo, regardless of the means. He feels guilty, recalling his promise to protect Theo, and regrets letting him go out alone. The butler rushes in, holding a letter, and addresses the Duke, informing him that a letter has arrived for him. In the letter, Charlotte Rania, daughter of Baron Rania from the Empire's southern region, introduces herself to the Duke. The Duke commands the butler to activate the Mana Gate immediately, as they are leaving for the barony of Rania right away. Steeder informs Charlotte that they have retrieved all the bodies found in the forest. Charlotte inquires if there were any signs of anyone surviving. Steeder replies in the negative. Charlotte ponders the situation, finding it strange. According to the original story, Theo died during the incident. If no assassin made it out alive, then it implies no one was chasing Theo or fleeing the scene. She questions how Theo died and why it differs from the original story. Steeder informs Charlotte of another peculiar aspect of the situation. While the cause of death for the knight escorting the young master is evident, it's not the case for the assassins. Charlotte queries him further, prompting Steeder to reveal that the assassins had no fatal wounds and there was no clear cause of death except for traces of magic found around the site. Charlotte expresses surprise at the notion of a mage being involved in the incident. Steeder agrees, indicating his belief that a mage was indeed involved. Charlotte reflects on the revelation that a mage may have been involved, realizing that it complicates the matter significantly. She acknowledges that while Sir Steeder can handle assassins with a sword, he would be no match for a mage. Concerned for their safety, she instructs Sir Steeder to have more guards patrol the area. Sir Steeder acknowledges her request with a simple, "Yes, Miss Charlotte." Charlotte requests Sir Steeder to ask a mage from the neighboring territory to come to their aid. Sir Steeder expresses surprise at the sudden request and suggests focusing on strengthening their defenses instead. Charlotte explains that she's not seeking a fight, but rather wants to preserve the corpse of someone who works for Duke Heinz until he sends someone to retrieve it, as they can't hold a funeral in such circumstances. Sir Steeder raises concerns about the expense of hiring a mage given their family's tight finances. However, Charlotte reassures him and beams, indicating that she has an idea to handle the situation. Charlotte removes her jewelry, stating that they can sell it to hire a mage with the money. Sir Steeder hesitates, expressing concern that the items are very special to her. Charlotte acknowledges that the jewelry was a gift from her parents the year she became an adult, which is why she is willing to give it up. She emphasizes that her family and their territory are just as precious to her. Suddenly, Theo's voice is heard, expressing reluctance. Charlotte, intrigued, calls out to Theo and approaches him, asking what's going on. Upon seeing Charlotte, Theo runs towards her crying and hugs her tightly. He continues to cry as the nanny explains that they were trying to give him a bath and thinks he's feeling shy. Theo wails, expressing his fear and desire to stay with Charlotte. Charlotte comforts him, asking if they scared him and reassuring him that he can be with her now. Theo sniffles and agrees. Charlotte lifts and hugs Theo, then begins to bathe him. She notices a mark on his body as she bathes him. After Theo is ready, Charlotte reads him a story. She suggests continuing the rest of the book, beginning with the tale of a great mage named William and his best friend Celine. Theo urges her to read faster. Charlotte reflects on how cute he is before continuing the story. She narrates how William and Celine embarked on a journey to defeat a terrifying dragon. However, one day Celine disappeared without a word, and William searched all over the world to find her to no avail. Charlotte ponders whether it's appropriate to continue reading the story to a child, considering the intense events that follow. Despite her concerns, she decides to continue. She narrates how William, after losing his friend Celine, slowly begins to lose his mind and falls ill with a mysterious fever. Despite the efforts of numerous doctors, his condition worsens. When Celine returns upon hearing the news, it's already too late. The doctor informs her that William won't make it through the night. Overwhelmed with sadness, Celine sits by his side and cries while hugging him. Suddenly, Celine's tears, falling on William's cheek, begin to emit light which envelops his entire body. When the light fades, William's health miraculously returns and they live happily ever after. Charlotte marvels at the miraculous story she just read to Theo, who has fallen asleep. She affectionately ruffles his hair and reflects on how lovely of a child he is, feeling grateful that she encountered him in the forest. Charlotte considers the fact that she was able to save Theo as miraculous as a fairy tale. However, she also feels a bit concerned about Theo's anxiety when she's not around, attributing it to the trauma of being saved by her. She understands his discomfort being in a house full of strangers, realizing that no child enjoys being bathed by someone they just met. She contemplates the tattoo she noticed on Theo's back during his bath, wondering if members of the Heinz family have tattoos from a young age. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, prompting Charlotte to wonder who could be visiting at this hour. She opens the door to find the maid, Emma, looking anxious. Emma informs Charlotte that Viscount Lowton is downstairs and urgently needs to see her. Charlotte is shocked to hear that he's here again, especially at such a late hour. Emmett explains that Viscount Lowton is causing a commotion on the first floor and appears to be drunk. She expresses concern that Sir Cedar is not present. Emma sighs and agrees to go downstairs. Charlotte leaves the room door open as she exits. Theo wakes up from his sleep in a sleepy state, calling out for Charlotte in panic as he searches for her. He hops out of bed and leaves the room to continue his search for Charlotte. Charlotte confronts Viscount Lowton about the disturbance he's causing at such a late hour. Lowton, in a drunken state, expresses his difficulty in seeing her and asks if she has considered his proposal. Frustrated, Charlotte admits uncertainty. Lowton questions her hesitation, emphasizing the benefits of accepting his proposal, such as becoming a viscountess and relieving her family of their debt. Charlotte dismisses Viscount Lowton's proposal with a scoff, assuring him that the debt will be paid on time and stating firmly that she will never become Viscountess Lowton. Lowton becomes angry upon hearing this, labeling Charlotte as insolent. In his rage, he raises his hand to slap Charlotte. Charlotte contemplates finding a reason to make him back off, even if it means enduring a slap from him. However, Theo intervenes, blocking Lowton from reaching Charlotte and admonishing him for harassing her, declaring him a bad man. Lowton laughs at Theo's intervention, dismissing him as just a child and attempting to slap Charlotte again. However, Theo uses his magic spell to hurt Lowton's hand, commanding him to go away and declaring his dislike for bad men like him. Lowton feels pain in his hand and becomes anxious, questioning what's happening. Charlotte wonders about the sudden turn of events. Lowton, in pain, cries out as he feels his arm hurting. Lowton becomes increasingly angered, threatening Charlotte with regret for how she treated him and issuing a warning about the looming deadline for repayment. Despite his threats, Charlotte remains confident and firm, causing Lowton to eventually leave. Once he's gone, Charlotte's facade of confidence fades and she plops down on the floor, feeling anxious. Theo, concerned for her well-being, asks if she's all right. Charlotte, still processing the encounter, questions why Theo is awake and out there. Overwhelmed by emotion, Theo expresses his feelings, admitting that he missed Charlotte. Charlotte expresses surprise at Theo's admission that he missed her, and he nods in agreement, explaining how much he misses her when she's not around. Charlotte kisses him on the cheek, remarking on his special power. Theo, intrigued, questions whether he has a power, prompting Charlotte to explain how his presence makes people smile and forget their problems. She suggests they return to bed since Theo is sleepy, and he agrees. However, just then, Theo faints, causing Charlotte to become anxious about his well-being. Charlotte expresses guilt over Theo's condition, feeling responsible for not paying more attention to him. The maid reassures her, stating that it's not her fault and urging her to go get some rest while they take care of Theo. The doctor admits uncertainty about the exact cause of Theo's condition. As Charlotte heads towards her room, the nanny approaches her, crying. Charlotte questions her about the reason for her tears. The nanny explains that Theo's fever is not improving and is getting worse. The doctor is warned that Theo might not make it through the night, and even if his fever subsides, there may be permanent damage due to its severity. Charlotte rushes into Theo's room, calling out his name anxiously. She becomes distressed as she places her hand on Theo's forehead and realizes he has a high fever. Crying, Charlotte holds his hand tightly, pleading for him to get better soon so they can play together. She apologizes for not paying enough attention to him. Suddenly, Theo regains consciousness and calls out Charlotte's name, causing her to jolt in surprise. Theo asks where Charlotte was, and she apologizes, promising not to leave his side again. He wipes away her tears, comforting her and telling her not to cry. Emotionally overwhelmed, Charlotte hugs him tightly. Theo expresses concern about the bad man not coming back, referring to Lowton, and Charlotte reassures him that Lowton will return, comforting him. Theo expresses his determination to protect Charlotte, but she insists that he doesn't need to. However, Theo remains adamant about protecting her. Charlotte reflects on Theo's near-death experience and worries about him facing another ordeal, wondering if it's because she, a character with no role in the original story, rescued him. Suddenly, she sees some flashes but ignores them, choosing instead to hug Theo. The next morning, Charlotte wakes up, yawning as she realizes she must have dozed off. Feeling sore, she wonders why her body feels this way and why she feels so drowsy. She looks beside her and sees Theo sleeping peacefully. She gently pats his head and reflects on how his fever has gone down, likely due to the medicine finally kicking in. Seeing Theo smile, Charlotte feels relieved. Theo wakes up from sleep and calls out to Charlotte. She confirms her presence and asks if he's feeling better or still in pain. Theo hugs her and mentions pudding, which surprises Charlotte. He expresses his desire to have some pudding, and Charlotte agrees, suggesting they go have the pudding he missed out on yesterday. Theo also wants to go see the kitty cat, which Charlotte agrees to as well. She asks if he wants to get up now, to which Theo excitedly agrees. Theo enjoys eating pudding while Charlotte and the doctor discuss his surprising recovery. The doctor explains that despite Theo's high fever, he is now completely fine without any issues, which astonishes both Charlotte and the doctor. Charlotte seeks confirmation that Theo is indeed better now, and the doctor reassures her. Charlotte reflects on her mixed feelings about Theo's sudden recovery. Just then, Emma nervously informs Charlotte of an urgent matter. Duke Heinz has arrived. Charlotte carries Theo, as he asks her if she's sick, to which she responds that she's not but is a bit concerned. Just then, the nanny calls out to Charlotte, advising her to stay in her room and leave everything to them. Charlotte explains that she can't do that because her father isn't present, so she has to deal with the situation. Despite the nanny's concern, Charlotte reassures her with a pat on the shoulder and a reassuring smile, stating that everything will be fine. Charlotte nervously takes Theo downstairs. Theo becomes happy on seeing his brother, the Duke. Charlotte realizes that the Duke must be Duke Carlisle Heinz. She then hands Theo over to the Duke, who kisses Theo's forehead. Theo expresses his frustration, asking what took the Duke so long and mentioning how scared he was. Charlotte reflects on the Duke's appearance, noticing how pale he looks and speculating on whether her previous impression of him being cold was mistaken. Theo informs the Duke enthusiastically about how Charlotte gave him pudding and played with him. The Duke glances towards Charlotte, prompting her to reflect on his intense gaze, reminiscent of the description in the novel portraying him as a beast resembling a wolf. The Duke then bows to Charlotte, and she responds with a curtsy, introducing herself as Charlotte Rania. Charlotte contemplates anxiously about whether the Duke will hold her family accountable for Theo's safety, and if he will suspect them due to the incident occurring in their domain. She hopes they won't be implicated. The Duke expresses gratitude to Charlotte for taking care of Theo and assures her that House Heinz will remember her generosity and compensate her for it. Charlotte feels relieved by his words and promises full cooperation with the investigation. The Duke thanks her for her consideration. The Duke informs Theo that it's time for them to return home. Theo eagerly asks if Charlotte will come with them, expressing his fondness for her. The Duke considers Theo's request, but decides that only he and Theo will be returning home, explaining that Charlotte needs to stay because it's her home. Theo becomes angry and refuses to leave, expressing his desire to live there too. Despite Theo's protests, the Duke insists that he must go home, leading Theo to push him away and express his anger towards him. Theo runs towards Charlotte, but she flinches and clenches her fists, explaining to him that he needs to return to his own home. Theo, crying, stubbornly expresses his hatred towards Carlisle and Charlotte, refusing to leave. The Duke is unsure of what to do, attempting to calm Theo down, but Theo suddenly loses consciousness and begins to tremble. Charlotte, alarmed, calls for the maid to bring the doctor immediately, and the maid acknowledges her request. Theo trembles in distress as Charlotte tries to wake him up, becoming increasingly worried. She pleads with him to breathe, but Theo struggles to respond. Suddenly, there's a flash of light, leaving Charlotte puzzled about what's happening. The Duke grabs Charlotte's hands, surprising her as his hands also begin to shine. Unable to believe what's happening, the Duke is left in disbelief. Theo sleeps peacefully on the bed, while Charlotte sits nearby, deep in thought. She ponders the strange occurrence of the light that appeared when she and the Duke touched Theo. Reflecting on the events, she wonders about the significance of the light and its connection to the original novel's storyline. Despite her relief that Theo is now better, she can't shake off her curiosity about the novel's details, letting out a sigh as she contemplates further. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. Charlotte asks who it is, and Duke responds, asking if he can come in. Charlotte grants permission, informing him that Theo fell asleep a little while ago and reassuring him that the doctor said there was nothing to worry about and no permanent damage. She expresses confusion about the doctor's attribution of Theo's recovery to her. As Duke steps towards her, Charlotte reacts with surprise. Duke stares at her without saying anything. Charlotte becomes nervous, wondering why he's staring at her like that. She fidgets, unsure of what to say about the light they both witnessed earlier. Duke then asks her if she's ever heard of the term neutralizer. Charlotte repeats the term in surprise, reflecting that she had a feeling at that moment that this encounter marked a turning point and signaled a change in the story from the novel. Charlotte reflects on the story from the novel. I'm the Duke's contractual wife. In the novel, magic played a significant role, with mages using their innate mana to practice magic. However, controlling mana was delicate work, requiring proper training. There were exceptions, though, known as Rosettos, who could use magic even without mana. These individuals inherited the blood of the first mage and possessed unmatched power. However, they had a fatal flaw known as mana rampage. During a mana rampage, they suffered from high fever and could even die if not fully trained. In essence, they were walking time bombs, much like Theo. Charlotte contemplates the situation, realizing that many mysterious events can be explained if Theo is indeed a Rosetto. The lack of a clear cause of death for the assassins and the traces of magic left behind likely resulted from Theo's mana rampage. The mark on Theo's back could signify his status as a Rosetto. This realization raises questions about Charlotte's own identity as a neutralizer. Rosettos rely on neutralizers since they cannot control mana themselves. The evidence is too compelling for Charlotte to deny. This revelation implies that she won't be able to live a normal life anymore as she'll become deeply involved with the male lead. Duke informs Charlotte that based on recent events, she appears to be a neutralizer. He then makes a proposal, suggesting that until Theo can control his mana, Charlotte should become the Duchess of House Heinz. This revelation leaves Charlotte stunned. During the night, Charlotte sits beside Theo as he sleeps. She reflects on the title Duchess Heinz. Earlier, she nervously asked Duke why she needed to be the Duchess, suggesting that it would make more sense for her to be hired as Theo's tutor if he needed someone by his side. Duke acknowledges her point but emphasizes that a tutor can't have House Heinz Knight as her escort. This realization dawns on Charlotte, understanding the potential danger Theo faces. Charlotte asks if this is the best way for Duke to protect a neutralizer he has managed to find after much hardship. Duke acknowledges her perceptiveness. Charlotte nervously smiles and shakes her head, expressing her concerns about becoming the Duchess, given that they just met today. She suggests finding another way, but Duke leans towards her. Duke is firm as he suggests coming up with a story. He emphasizes that without Charlotte's help, Theo could suffer a mana rampage at any time. He urges her to accept his proposal, promising handsome compensation. Charlotte requests time to think about it, to which Duke agrees, mentioning he will prepare a contract for her to review carefully. The contract between Charlotte Rania and Carlisle Heinz is set to last for 5 years. Carlisle Heinz will pay Charlotte Rania 500,000 gold every year as per the contract terms. Charlotte is incredulous as she realizing the substantial amount involved. With 500,000 gold every year, she calculates that even after repaying Viscount Loughton, she would still have 450,000 gold left over. This surplus amount could significantly improve the living standards of the residents of Rania, providing them with abundance. She continues reading the contract, noting that Charlotte Rania and Carlisle Heinz are expected to fully cooperate as spouses throughout their marriage. Charlotte Rania is specifically tasked with providing the best care for Theodore Heinz to ensure he doesn't fall ill. Charlotte realizes that the most crucial aspect of this contract is Theodore's well-being. The possibility of him experiencing another mana rampage weighs heavily on her mind. Theo mumbles in his sleep, expressing affection for Charlotte. As he opens his eyes, he notices Charlotte awake and apologizes for potentially waking her. Concerned about her, he inquires if she had a nightmare. Charlotte fibs, claiming she indeed had a nightmare, preventing her from sleeping. Theo reassures her, holding her hand and promising to protect her, ensuring she won't have any more bad dreams. Charlotte is touched by his words, pondering over them and reflecting on her response to the proposal she heard earlier. The next day, Charlotte gets ready. Duke inquires if she's finished considering the proposal. With a smile, Charlotte accepts the contract. Duke acknowledges her decision as a wise choice and expresses his intention to discuss a few conditions. Duke inquires about Charlotte's conditions. She responds that she doesn't want to get married, which perplexes him. Charlotte reflects on his confusion, understanding that she's proposing to accept the contract without marriage. She suggests that they should get engaged first to avoid suspicion since the two houses haven't interacted before. Charlotte believes they should make it appear as if they're marrying for love. Therefore, she concludes that they shouldn't marry yet. Duke agrees to Charlotte's proposal for a grace period and suggests setting the engagement period for 1 year. Charlotte reflects on this time frame, realizing that before the year is up, Duke may have no use for her, especially with the impending introduction of Penelope, a female lead from the novel. Penelope made her appearance 6 months after Theo's assassination. She and the male lead meet at a party hosted by the Imperio family. When Penelope trips and falls into Carlisle's arms, the painful, throbbing sensation inside him calms down. Before that incident, Carlisle thought what he was suffering from was the grief of losing Theo, but it wasn't. He was suffering so much because he was a Rosetto. Charlotte empathizes with Duke's situation, wondering why his parents didn't take measures to address his condition. However, her thoughts are interrupted by Duke, who queries if she heard his proposal. Startled, she admits to being momentarily distracted. Duke suggests an engagement for a year followed by marriage the next fall, to which Charlotte agrees, adding a clause for terminating the contract if it becomes unnecessary. Duke approves and Charlotte signs the contract. Charlotte insists that we must devise a plan to convince her parents, mentioning her father's imminent return later in the day. Duke suggests that his status as Duke Heinz's son-in-law might suffice to persuade him. However, Charlotte reveals that her father prioritizes love over power, indicating that recounting the story of their meeting may offer a better chance of success. Charlotte ponders for a moment before posing a question to Duke, wondering about his presence at the Foundation Day festival 2 years prior. Duke responds with curiosity, prompting Charlotte to recall her own attendance at the festival in the capital during that time. She suggests to Duke that they inform her father that they crossed paths during the festivities. Charlotte suggests a fabricated story, proposing that they inform her father that they encountered each other at the festival and were immediately drawn to one another. She details how they parted ways before exchanging names, with Duke leaving behind a cherished item that Charlotte kept. She suggests that when Duke came to retrieve the item, they both recognized each other from the festival. Charlotte then turns to Duke and asks for his opinion, expressing confidence in the story's persuasiveness. Duke mutters about the Foundation Day festival and then proceeds to place a pendant on the table. He explains that it's been with him since childhood and no one else knows about it, making it plausible to claim he lost it 2 years ago. Duke expresses his certainty that this plan will be successful. Charlotte expresses her anticipation of collaborating with Duke and suggests they give their best effort. They then shake hands. In the evening, Charlotte's father arrives home, visibly excited to see his daughter. He greets her warmly, expressing his delight at being back. Charlotte welcomes him and suggests he must be tired. Her father reassures her that his absence wasn't too burdensome and indicates that the issue has been resolved. However, before he can finish his sentence, Viscount Lowton arrives, questioning why he's being called filthy and proposing a deal for Charlotte's family. Lowton inquires about the money, emphasizing the benefits of an early marriage to Charlotte. Charlotte's father confirms that the funds are prepared. Lowton expresses surprise as Charlotte's father checks the details, revealing a principal of 50,000 gold with an interest of 5,000 gold, totaling 55,000 gold. Lowton is incredulous, questioning how they managed to gather such a large sum in a short time. Charlotte attempts to make sense of the situation, affirming their ability to repay Lowton's money. Charlotte's father discloses that it was Charlotte's idea to invest in a mine in the south, resulting in the dividends they received. He firmly instructs Lowton to take the money and cease any further involvement with his daughter. Lowton, overwhelmed with anger, reacts impulsively by tearing up the check. Charlotte's father is taken aback by his actions and questions his behavior. Lowton, driven by his ego, grabs Charlotte's father by the collar, expressing disdain for his status as a poor baron and accusing him of looking down on him. He then violently throws Charlotte's father to the ground. Charlotte reacts with concern for her father. Lowton continues to yell, questioning the legitimacy of the 50,000 gold and accusing Charlotte of attempting to deceive him with counterfeit checks. He threatens retaliation against Charlotte and her family. Suddenly, Duke intervenes, placing his sword against Lowton's throat in anger, demanding to know what he's doing to his fiancée. Lowton becomes anxious at the mention of fiancée, prompting Charlotte to visibly open her mouth in surprise. A nervous Charlotte attempts to intervene with Duke, expressing her discomfort at Lowton's revelation. However, her father, shocked by Lowton's statement, confronts her, demanding an explanation regarding her engagement. Charlotte stammers, struggling to respond. She shoots a glare at Duke, reflecting on his obliviousness to the chaos he's caused and feeling exasperated by the situation. Duke expresses his curiosity about the curious looks directed at him since yesterday, but Butler Chase remains silent. Duke prompts Chase for a response, to which Chase beams and apologizes, attributing his silence to being impressed by Duke's quick adaptation to Rania Manor. He explains feeling remorse for arriving late as Duke's aide, but acknowledges Duke's success as positive. Duke inquires if Chase has discovered anything notable about House Rania, to which Chase responds negatively, stating that nothing stood out. Duke reflects on the situation, pondering the humble nature of the family and the tranquil countryside setting. He notes Baron Rainia's evident strong affection for his daughter as the only noteworthy aspect of the family. Earlier, Charlotte's father questions whether they met at the capital, prompting a nervous response from Charlotte as she presents the pendant as evidence. He then turns to Duke, inquiring about his genuine feelings for his daughter, expressing concern that it might be just a passing interest. Charlotte and Duke exchange looks before Duke confidently assures him of his sincerity, stating his need for Charlotte and his commitment to ensuring her happiness. Charlotte nods in agreement with a smile, confirming her assurance that she won't regret her decision. Chase expresses concern to Duke, reiterating his belief that they are rushing into the situation. Duke counters, emphasizing the urgency due to Theo's safety being at risk without Charlotte Rainia's assistance. Chase points out that they still haven't identified who was behind the assassination attempt. Duke scoffs at the notion of the Rania family being capable of such a plot. Chase flinches at Duke's reaction, emphasizing the significance of marriage and questioning Duke's apparent haste, noting that the Duke Heinz he knew wasn't someone who made hasty decisions. Duke dismisses suspicions towards House Rania, suggesting that if they were indeed enemies, it would be advantageous as they could monitor them closely. He then shifts the conversation to a point of confusion regarding sapphire jewelry. Chase clarifies that the jewelry was sold to hire a mage. Duke acknowledges this but questions why the Runia family didn't use the proceeds from the sale to settle their debt with Viscount Lowton and prevent his harassment. Chase explains that the maid informed him that when Miss Charlotte intended to sell the jewelry, the Baroness intervened. He further elucidates that the jewels were gifts presented to Miss Charlotte by her parents during her coming-of-age ceremony and held sentimental value. Duke reflects on the significance of Miss Charlotte selling such precious items for a child she had just met and a deceased knight. He then commands Chase to retrieve all of Miss Charlotte's sapphire jewelry immediately. Chase expresses surprise at the directive, to which Duke reaffirms his order. Chase acknowledges the command and agrees to carry it out. Duke reflects on Charlotte Runia, describing her as unique, sometimes exhibiting boldness while other times appearing innocently naive. He ponders her character, noting that someone who sacrificed something precious for a child she barely knew likely couldn't be involved in an assassination attempt. However, he admits uncertainty, acknowledging their limited interactions. Suddenly, Duke experiences pain and curses, expressing frustration that finding Theo did not alleviate the agony. He recalls a moment when the pain momentarily vanished, the day he held Charlotte's hand. In that brief instant, he felt immense comfort and tranquility. He acknowledges Charlotte's ability to stabilize Theo's condition, but questions why he specifically experiences relief in her presence. Duke hears Theo's voice from outside and is startled, prompting him to peek from the window to see Charlotte playing with Theo. Charlotte explains the name of the flower to Theo and offers to make him a flower bracelet. Theo is surprised by the idea of a flower bracelet. He notices Duke on the balcony and waves his hand, calling out to him. Duke hears a sound and his expression becomes serious as he wonders about its origin. He observes a flower pot about to fall on Theo and reacts with concern, beginning to shout a warning. However, Charlotte also realizes the danger and screams Theo's name. She rushes towards him to save him, embracing him just as the flower pot falls on Charlotte instead, ultimately saving Theo. The maid expresses concern for Charlotte, exclaiming at the sight of her. Theo also shows concern for Charlotte's well-being. Despite blood starting to trickle from her forehead, Charlotte reassures Theo that he's all right before fainting and starting to fall. At that moment, Duke rushes over and catches her, yelling for a doctor to be brought immediately. Later, Charlotte is resting in bed. When she wakes up, she feels pain and expresses her discomfort with a groan. Theo notices and asks if she's in pain and if it hurts a lot. Charlotte ponders for a moment, realizing that she must have fallen asleep right after receiving treatment. Theo expresses concern, mentioning that she seemed to be in pain when they stitched up her wound. Charlotte reassures Theo, stating that she feels all right now. Teary-eyed, Theo grasps Charlotte's hand, expressing his desire for her not to be in pain. Charlotte reflects on Theo's adorableness and recalls Duke holding her hand during her treatment. While she was being treated, Duke suggests they go to the capital as soon as possible, instructing the servants to prepare for their departure. Charlotte wonders if Duke was worried about her but dismisses the thought, assuming he was only concerned about Theo's safety. Theo notices Charlotte's smile and asks her why she's smiling. Charlotte fibs, attributing her smile to the disappearance of her pain when Theo blew on her wound and praises him as the best. Excited by her words, Theo beams and hugs her. Emma announces that everything is prepared for their departure, prompting Charlotte to acknowledge and assure her that she'll join her shortly. Charlotte reflects on her upcoming journey, feeling a mixture of nervousness and sadness despite knowing she'll return in 6 months. However, she reassures herself that everything will be fine. Her mother and father approach, and her mother emotionally embraces her, expressing her love and urging Charlotte to take care of herself. Her father echoes the sentiment, assuring her that her happiness is their priority. Charlotte bids them farewell, urging them to take care of themselves before departing. Charlotte begins to leave but looks back to see her parents crying, which makes her emotional as well. As she steps outside, she sees Duke and Chase in front of her. Theo excitedly runs towards Charlotte. Charlotte acknowledges him and agrees to leave together, prompting Theo to express his excitement. Chase approaches with a box in hand, stating that before their departure, they'd like to give Charlotte something. Charlotte expresses surprise, prompting Chase to open the box and reveal the jewelry she sold to hire a mage. Charlotte is taken aback and asks how they obtained it. Duke explains that returning the items to her felt like the right thing to do. Charlotte becomes emotional, reflecting on the significance of the jewelry her family had gifted her, which allowed her to live as Charlotte Runia. She never expected to see them again. Teary-eyed but smiling, Charlotte expresses her gratitude. Duke responds, stating that he did it because it was the right thing to do. Charlotte continues to thank them, emphasizing the preciousness of the returned jewelry to her. Chase interrupts, informing them that it's time to depart. They all head to the carriage. Excited, Theo exclaims about going to their place and living together. Charlotte agrees, acknowledging that they are indeed going to live together now. Charlotte reflects on her upcoming life in the capital, acknowledging that it won't always be easy. However, she finds solace in the knowledge that she has a family waiting for her. Determined, she declares her intention to return, no matter the challenges she may face. As night falls, Charlotte ponders the recent occurrences, feeling that something is amiss. She reflects on the potted plant falling toward Theo's head and his near-choking incident, considering them as possibly more than mere coincidences. Charlotte wonders why these events keep happening to Theo and questions if it's because he survived when he was meant to die or because she saved him. She contemplates the idea that Theo's fate may have been altered from the original story and resolves not to let him die. Charlotte rejects the notion of Theo being merely a literary device to make Duke's story more tragic. The carriage comes to a halt and Duke informs Charlotte that they have arrived. Charlotte wakes up Theo and tells him they've reached their destination. Sleepily, Theo responds affirmatively. Duke then offers to carry Theo inside, but Theo refuses, insisting on going in with Charlotte. Duke's expression turns sullen at Theo's refusal. Charlotte observes Duke's affection for his little brother. She notices the magic mana outside and realizes they've arrived at the mana gate. She enters the mana gate and Duke asks her to hold his hand as a precaution to ensure they and Theo arrive at the same destination. Charlotte initially questions his request, but ultimately decides that touching his hand is not a big deal. She places her hand in Duke's hand and they are transported through the magic mana to the palace. Charlotte reflects on the beginning of their journey into the world of the original story.